Um, Welcome to the new year. Happy New Year, everyone. And to our 2023-24 season of First Saturday monthly presentations. Um, for those new to First Saturday, we are a monthly ongoing educational lecture series that covers a wide range of Chinese history, culture, and art-related topics. All of our programs are free and open to the public. And this lecture series has been going on now for 22 years. Started back when the Lanzhou Chinese Garden first opened as a continuing education program for the docents. And over all these years has expanded to be now a public program for the wider community. Let me introduce today's speaker. We're delighted to welcome her back. She's been a presenter for us in the past, Dr. Ann Wetherell. She's an assistant visiting professor of art history at Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. A specialist in Chinese studies, she holds a PhD in Chinese art history from the University of Oregon. Her research areas include Ming Dynasty painting, Buddhist art of the late imperial period, and Chinese American history in Oregon. As a professor of Asian art history, she has taught at several universities in our region, including Portland State University, Willamette University, University of Oregon, and Pacific University. She currently teaches at Willamette University, as I mentioned, and her classes focus on art, architecture, visual culture of India, China, and Japan. And she's also teaching a remote class on Japanese art at the University of Oregon. In addition to her teaching and research on Asian art, Dr. Wetherell is a soprano singer who actively performs in several Portland-based ensembles. Just this Christmas, some of our First Saturday people were able to enjoy a concert with her and her group. So please join me in giving Dr. Ann Wetherell a warm welcome. Welcome, Ann. So glad to have you.
I'm very pleased to be here. I always enjoy getting a chance to speak to First Saturday. A little bit of the kind of genesis of this particular talk was I actually have spoken on Shubing before for First Saturday, but that was back in 2018 in June. And so I looked back to see what I'd actually talked about with that. And how this came about was that Ling had contacted me to see if there would be something I'd want to do and what kind of topic I wanted to talk about. And so we cast around ideas, and she reminded me of the Shubing talk that I had given in 2018 and thought it would be time for an update. So I thought that I would, in fact, do that because there's been a number of works by Shubing that I wanted to explore. And so this seemed like a good time to do this. The talk I gave the last time was really about his interest in communication and the written word, and we will be touching on that a little bit. But today's talk is going to be about things beyond the book from the sky. The other thing that kind of gave me an idea for this project was a Zoom call that I was on with Shubing in January of 2021. And the circumstances surrounding this was that I was a guest speaker for a colleague's winter term class at Whitworth. And of course, that was during the pandemic, so everybody had to talk, gave their talks on Zoom or remotely. And so I gave mine, and then a couple of weeks later, I got this invitation from the professor of that class inviting me to come to the last of the lectures that she had planned, which was with Shubing. And so I was very excited about that, and had my pad of paper and notes ready to take. And the only thing I wrote was really at the top was, I'm on a Zoom call with Shubing. Because there were not any really questions that the students could ask. I certainly didn't ask any questions. And what he did was then begin to really discuss what he believed to be the role of contemporary art in society. And we'll be returning to this, especially at the end of this talk. But being during, again, the coronavirus, he ended up analogizing the role of contemporary art to the coronavirus. That the function of contemporary art and the way it should move through a population was like a virus. It should infect, it should transform and adapt, and to permeate pretty much all of society, but also that it had to really adapt. Contemporary art really needs to adapt to the social and political structures that are in place now. Xu believed that the role of art is more important today due to the social, geopolitical, and environmental context in which we find ourselves. And so this is something that as through the Beyond the Book from the Sky, at the end of this talk, I'll be talking about his work during the pandemic, two works that he refers to repeatedly in talks. Xu is very accessible in terms of, you could find out more about him through his very extensive website, xubing.com. He also, since the pandemic, has been giving numerous lectures at different institutions. And those lectures are generally recorded. There were some from New York University and some from UC Davis just this past year, in which he is then returning to some of the same ideas that I just mentioned about the need for contemporary art to be like the virus. That he talked about those this year, and were the same ideas that he'd been referring to back in 2021 when I was on the Zoom call with him. So that's the kind of the general how we got to this point, but probably some of you do not know Xu Bing. And so here's a little background on him. This is a person of tremendous international stature. He maintains studios both in New York and in Beijing. He is a professor at the Central Academy of Fine Arts, which is where he graduated from Beijing there in 1981 and got his master's at CAFA in 1987. This slide has information about printmaking, installation, drawing, calligraphy, sculpture, and film as being some of those media in which he works. We can also then add digital media, electronics. We can even add decommissioned satellites as being some of the things that he's actually working with now. He is in his current role now. He came back to, was in the United States between 1990 and 2007. He returned to China in 2007, became vice president of the Central Academy of Fine Arts in 2008. He currently is professor and head of the academic committee at CAFA, which is a tremendously important role for him. It's a tremendously important and impactful role because he shapes the curriculum of the most important art institute in China. So not only has he has tremendous impact on contemporary art today, but he is shaping the future of contemporary art in China. And so this is a person to really pay attention to see what he is doing. He has won accolades, many awards throughout the world. When he was here in the United States in 1999, he won the MacArthur Fellowship, oftentimes called the Genius Award. You can see that the awards are international, from Wales, from an Asian Arts Award, and finally then in the 2015 received the US Department of State Medal of the Arts. I'm sure there's more things he has won since then. However, they don't fit on the slide, so I did not include them. The work for which he is most famous is The Book from the Sky, which I've included in the title here. It was first exhibited in 1989 in what was the China Avant-Garde exhibition. This happened just 4 months prior to the June 4th Tiananmen incident or crackdown. This work has been called by the eminent scholar Michael Sullivan, who was a great champion of contemporary art of China, as the most important work of Chinese art of the 20th century. And for nearly 40 years now, it has been the subject of numerous books, tremendous amounts of scholarship, symposia, debates. That this is a work now that's been included in major art historical texts, such as Gardner's Art Through the Ages. It is now included in pretty much all works on contemporary China. And this will continue, again, to have tremendous impact in contemporary art. One of the most important things about what we're talking about today is how Xu Bing creates these absolutely immersive environments. That he works a lot extensively with installation and creates environments, and especially in this example, where the viewer is essentially surrounded by words. That there are printed scrolls hanging from the ceiling, printed scrolls that are on the wall panels, and then these books that we see here on the floor. And these are the kinds of things that you walk into and are surrounded by. And this is a tremendously interesting work and so important because it reflects the significance of literature and the high value of literacy in Chinese culture. This was created by woodblock printing. One of the most interesting things and the challenging things about this work that really sets it apart is the fact that all the characters are fake. He devised and designed 4,000 characters. He carved them on individual blocks in pear wood, and then found a way of actually printing them. And you can go to his website, and he has a long essay about what he did in order to create this, and it's really quite fascinating. The entire project, and here's some more of the created movable type racks, like we see here, carved these individual characters that they were then printed, or examples like this, that on the left-hand side, we see the carved block of the frontispiece of this book. The entire project looks really serious, and it is meant, and it certainly adheres to Chinese historical tradition of thread binding of books, of blue silk covers. The typeface that he has used and adapted for this is a typeface called Song typeface that was invented in the Ming Dynasty. It is what is used in government documents. So the books itself have this sense of sobriety and seriousness, and they should be taken seriously. In looking at this, Xu Bing is very, very interested in audience reaction, and that the audience reaction to this particular book this from the sky, was one of frustration and anger and disillusionment, and the reason why is because this, of course, disrupts the viewer's expectations and perceptions. That he talks about eminent scholars of Chinese literature that walked in to see this installation and would spend hours trying to find a character that they could identify. One of the challenges, and it's so interesting about this, is that he saw viewers go from thinking there was something wrong on the page to something wrong with them, that they couldn't read this. And not only is it unreadable, but if you know anything about Chinese at all, you read Chinese at all, you realize that you can generally sound out characters. The way that he has combined different parts of characters into a new character makes it virtually unreadable, and you cannot sound it out. This is a silent book. And so Xu describes this as he states he spent 4 years making a book that said nothing at all. He was really interested in the viewer's reaction. And you are immediately drawn in because of how beautifully this is created. It's very, very crafted, carefully. Xu Bing states that he had to make it look perfect, otherwise it would not work. And so it needs to draw people in. One of the most important things about Xu Bing that we see a little bit here, and we'll continue to see, is that his work demands extended viewing. It requires that. It requires you to think and to ponder. You do not necessarily come to any rapid conclusion. And in fact, the conclusions and feelings you're going to have, the reactions are going to be different from person to person. He has stated this. He wants us to think. And he said, through my art, I hope to subvert our normal ways of thinking. So his work is interactive, engaging, we're drawn into it. One of the other very famous projects that he develops that is still in use, and if you go to the CAFA website, you will see this all over it, which is the square word or English calligraphy, New English calligraphy, that he developed in the early 1990s. And it emerges out of a question that he posed, which is, how do you combine two entirely different forms of script? Because this is actually, in looking at it, it looks Chinese. The characters are kind of square. It looks like it's got brushstrokes, but actually that is English. And so English readers can read this, but unless you read English, if you're Chinese readers, you cannot. So the top banner that we see there actually says art for the people. And if you look at it long enough for English readers, you will see that the upper portion of the character on the left is an A, and the R and T are below this. So you begin to be able to pick things out. He developed this while living in the United States. What we see below in the lower slide is one of the calligraphy classrooms that he set up in varieties of different museums throughout the United States to teach this. And that you can see there's actually students there. That this is part of what he does and how he engages people is this interest in challenging them to learn something, to move you out of your normal ways of thinking. The interesting thing that is many interesting things about this, but one of the things that how he combined these two scripts is that he turned the alphabet into Chinese characters, but you can see that there are some of those characters on the right-hand side that remind us of Chinese characters. But the building of the English words is based on the stroke order in which Chinese characters are written. And so we can see that actually in the lower section of this image. I guess I need to turn on a laser pointer here. You can see here where he gives you then the stroke order. So not only are you trying to read this, but you're trying to then compose your English writing according to these principles. It requires thought. It requires participation and learning. So there's three projects that I'd like to show you today by Xu that have some elements of these. First of all, they do demand that you become immersed in an environment. They do demand that you think. They do demand that that you that in terms of his interest in reaction, that you do have these kind of reactions to them that sometimes can be really, really very, very surprising. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with these was the materials themselves, and to show how Xu Bing then can take what is a very mundane type of material that we would see all the time, and sometimes it's trash, it's basically garbage, uses that and slightly tweaks it in such a way that it makes you see something dramatically different. And it has a far greater impact because these are materials that we see every single day. They're ubiquitous in many, many cultures. So these are are site-specific works. The origins of background story, which is the first one we're going to talk about, is in 2004. And the origins are that he was invited to do a project at the Asian Art Museum in Berlin. And upon arriving, he found out that 95% of the original collection at that museum had been looted by the Soviet army at the end of World War II. So in response to this, he created what he described as ghosts of paintings that would have been displayed. And they are placed in the vitrines or glass cases that would have housed these original paintings. They look like, and you can see in this slide, they really look like ink paintings. They look like Chinese ink paintings that are done with brush on rice paper. And Xu describes these as painting with air and light. And he then goes on to say that one of the crucial things is how he choreographs the light in order to create these effects. But there's no ink and brush here at all. Instead, these are all created with dried plant materials, bits of paper, cardboard, wads of tape, things that are basically trash or things that we should put in our compost bin. But the other crucial thing about this is that this is two sides. You are supposed to walk around and see the back of this, like you're seeing on the left. It's a little bit like a magician doing this amazing magic trick that then shows his hand. And in some ways, it is so much the opposite of this elegant and serene image that it becomes a challenge to be able to reconcile these two things. You're looking at these extremely delicate, in Chinese history, delicate paintings that have been preserved then for hundreds of years. And that here on the backside, where you see things that are extremely ephemeral, objects that are transitory, the whole thing is impermanent. And that the goal is, and Xu Bing writes about this also, is that it's that in-between state that he's interested in, that engenders that kind of reaction of surprise. That you can imagine if you would only be able to see the front side of this, as we're seeing the lower section here, that it wouldn't have the kind of impact that it does without being able to see how it was created. And in this case, again, he has used mundane materials that we see all the time and has transformed them, turned them into art materials. Art media makes us see them in a different way. Xu took on one of the most important paintings in the canon of Chinese art history. And I know there's at least a few people watching this that would immediately recognize this. It is based on the painting Dwelling in the Fuchun Mountains by Huang Gongwang, who was one of the four great masters of the Yuan dynasty, the oldest one of them. This painting was revolutionary in the 13th century, 14th century. And basically it has the position in Chinese art history, I would suggest, of Leonardo's Last Supper. It is that important. And maybe other art historians can suggest a different Western artwork, but that's the one that came to mind. And so it is a long, this was shown in Inside Out in Beijing in May 2014. This is the backside of it. And again, you can see here then the viewers are able to get up close to be able to look at the kinds of materials that are used here. Whether or not there's sticks, there's things that have been glued to the back of this panel. And one of the most important things about Huang Gongwang is that the brushwork at this time was really revolutionary. That it becomes the predominant feature, the distinctive strokes that he has created here become particularly associated with him and that are used by later Chinese painters as a way of paying homage to this person, as a way of then indicating their artistic lineage from the Yuan dynasty, that these same strokes that we're going to see here, what are called, what are called hemp fiber strokes, I'll point them right here, have been used for 800 years as a way, again, pointing back to Huang Wang. Xu Bing is very diligent and careful with the recreation of Huang Wang's paintings. Clearly, there has to be some changes that are made because, in fact, this is not done with brush and ink. And here you can see how he's then looking at a large scale photograph just to make sure that what he's got is right. And that the brush strokes that I've talked about, these hemp fiber strokes that we see there, we can see in larger scale here. These were immediately recognizable to anybody that would be looking at them. And what is it's fun for art historians, Chinese art historians, to discover that in fact he created those what are called hemp fiber strokes using hemp fiber. It's a nod to people that know the history of Chinese painting. I think it's probably like catnip for people like me that just love to find those kinds of puns, visual puns. And so again, like we talked about with the background story #1 in Berlin, that this again is going to be taken apart. It suggests that this is ephemeral, impermanent. The materials will dissolve, will degrade. And it's so interesting for me, for example, as a Chinese art historian, to be seeing one of the most venerated, impactful Chinese paintings in the last 800 years be turned into something that, or reflects something that is going to come apart, that is trash, that will be recycled. So it emphasizes again the ephemerality and the impermanence of installations like this. It makes us question what is real. Is the front or the backside real? There were some people that asked him if it's a 2 or 3 dimensional work. And clearly the front side seems to be 2 dimensions, but the whole thing, the whole creation of it exists in 3 dimensions. So as viewers, and we get to participate in visualizing how this whole thing was constructed. It questions, we question then, how do we create meaning for ourselves? How do we understand this? And this can be different for every single person. I just wanted to show this one because it's one of a smaller number of background stories in which it uses color. This was created, background story 10 in 2015, in what was originally a former factory. Now it's called 3 1/3, the Keelin Contemporary Center of Art in Beijing. This blue-green landscape is based on a painting by the Southern Song artist Zhao Boju. And it depicts then this Immortals Mountain, as we see here. It's so interesting to see how the whole surface has been gridded. And but what is so interesting about this is how it was created. It's done with discarded factory materials. This was an area that created plastic bags. So he uses plastic bags to create this blue-green landscape. And there's a kind of a disconnect here in some ways because the blue-green landscapes are associated since the 7th century with concepts of paradise and immortality. And so the question that sets up this thing, we're looking at images then of paradise or immortality and seclusion, immortal seclusion in these mountains. And how is that negated or changed by the fact that it's been created with trash, with these plastic bags, and the degradation, the environmental degradation of the world? So throughout these works, Xu takes the most mundane materials, ubiquitous in modern life, and then changes them, makes us see them in a different way. He uses them as art material, and in doing so creates this kind of element of surprise, this dramatic impact that we see. The Tobacco Project was a series of installations over a period of 11 years, and it's entirely about tobacco itself. It can be described sometimes as a history of tobacco. It deals with the social history and economy of tobacco, the U.S.-China relations, and really the effects of the U.S. market in tobacco. It reflects concerns for colonialism. It's been described as a social project as well, and it's also an artwork. So it seems to Shubing with this project is moving into a variety of different areas that change our idea of what art does. I would say what the role of art is, what it does. And this project began in Durham, North Carolina in 2000 when Xu was invited to Duke University to develop an art project. And when he arrived, he noticed the scent of tobacco permeating the air when he arrived in Durham, North Carolina, and found out then that Durham was the capital of the tobacco industry and marketing since the late 19th century. The founder of Duke University was James B. Duke, who was a tobacco tycoon with ties to China. And after the invention of a cigarette rolling machine in 1881, Duke leafed through a world atlas, looking only at the population of countries when he saw China's population of 430 million people at that time. He stated, that's where we're going to sell cigarettes. And under the guidance of James Duke, that then joined the American Tobacco Company with the British Tobacco Company, became the British American Tobacco Company. They began moving into the Chinese market in 1902 to exploit the Chinese market, to develop that market. And they ended up monopolizing it, sending vast quantities of cigarettes to China. What we're looking at here on the right-hand side is one of many advertisements for cigarettes that, and this is a Chinese brand, the Yanyang brand of Chinese cigarettes, that we find. It's a very interesting, if you're ever interested in looking at cigarette ads in China, this is the period to look at them and to see what they did to market them. This very, very elegant lady during this beautiful qipao, she's got jewelry on, she's sitting in a somewhat seductive position, and the fact that you can see her underskirt behind her, and she is sitting in front of what looks to be a classical Chinese garden behind her. Leans forward, smiles at the viewer, and that kind of elegance that we see here, the very beauty of this. They're oftentimes very seductive images that we see here. So tons and tons of ads. And although depicting women, these were really directed toward men. And in fact, men make up the predominant number of smokers in China. And today, China consumes a third of the world's tobacco. So just after the death of James Duke, then, they had sold, this British American Tobacco Company had sold 80 billion cigarettes in China in 1928. There were a number of smaller works of art that were created for the Tobacco Project, and these were created actually in the year 2000. This was it's called the Red Book, and what we see here is what is the Chunghua brand metal cigarette case with cigarettes that are stamped with quotations by Mao Zedong, and most of these, I believe, they are coming from the Little Red Book. Chunghua was Mao's favorite brand, and of course, smokers really wanted to emulate him. So that is also something that we see happening in this photo with is a Little Red Book, the quotations of Chairman Mao Zedong, which is the obvious association. Mao's Little Red Book was that point of indoctrination and control of the Chinese Communist Party during the Cultural Revolution. And in this photo, we see Mao smoking. Generally, you see Mao with a cigarette, and either in paintings of him or in photos of him. And you could see behind him then his other party leaders that are shaking this little red book, which is what they used to do. And so I wanted to show you here just very briefly some of the kinds of quotations that are included here. I don't know if you can see that, but it says classes struggle, some classes triumph, and others are eliminated. So this all is about class, the very tremendous awareness of class struggle that was in China in the 20th century, and especially in the Cultural Revolution, which affected Xu Bing. That Xu's father was a professor. He was considered to be a reactionary. So Xu came from one of the bad element families, and so he was one of the sent down youth. And so that this really reflects in his experiences in China, that his works reflects those experiences. Also, there's also another type of personal experience for Xu Bing here. The American Tobacco Project calendar book from 2000 has the spirit brand cigarette boxes we see on the left-hand side, but also his artist's father's medical records. His dad, Xu Bing's father, died of lung cancer from excessive smoking. Of course, the most dramatic works from the Tobacco Project are the tiger skin rugs. And again, using ubiquitous materials. These are all created out of 500,000 cigarettes, sometimes up to 650,000 cigarettes. And it's that juxtaposition of what is something extremely elegant, like a tiger skin rug that is then treated with a material that is so very ubiquitous. So the question is always, why a tiger skin rug? Well, tiger skins rugs, we can see here on the left-hand side. This is a photo that actually Xu Bing used in order to design the rugs that are created out of the cigarettes, that it becomes a symbol of luxury, of wealth, of colonialism in China. And the reason why is because when these Western foreigners would go to Asia, and oftentimes in India as well, they would go tiger hunting and bring back these trophies. So it indicates something of power and inequities of power of colonial occupation here. The tiger skin rug that is called First Class, as we see here, that's First Class. And here is the artist sketching the plans for First Class. Why is it called First Class? Well, the reason why is because First Class is a brand of Chinese cigarettes that is extremely cheap. However, the title of it, the brand name, suggests that kind of sense of privilege and wealth and luxury that one would find, one associates with a tiger skin rug. So in creating these, he's first had to work on gridded paper. And in looking at this, this almost looks like a series of Post-it notes, which would allow then the drawing to be gridded and built to and expanded in order to be able to make a large-scale installation. Here you can see more of the process of it and the design laying out of it. He then had to apply adhesive and begins placing the cigarettes to create First Class in 2011. And what is also very interesting about it is the direction, the choice of the direction of the cigarettes. I think you see a little bit of that there, but the texture of the cigarettes as well. And it kind of looks a little bit like hair that you want to maybe stroke the fur of this gigantic tiger. But also the choice of the direction of the cigarettes affects the color. that this is done with three colors. There's white and orange and there's brown, and depending on which way the cigarette is oriented, you're going to get a different color. But also it's a situation, if you walk around the tiger skin rug, you will see different colors. The aspect of it constantly changes. Again, it's an issue of perspective, that two people can be looking at this and see an entirely different image of this depending on where you're standing. So the 3D surface is really also very undulating, and close up, it's extremely beautiful. Oops, sorry, let me go back here. The other thing to consider about this is Shu's initial reaction in Durham was the scent of tobacco, and he recreates this in the tiger skin rugs when you walk in and you'd be surrounded by this, again, wafting scent of tobacco as being, again, kind of experiential thing that each one of us would experience. The final two works of art we're going to talk about need some context. And this section I called My Work During the Pandemic, because that's actually the title of several of Xubing's lectures that I watched. And again, also was associated with the Whitman Zoom call that I participated in. In these talks, Xu reflects the dramatic changes that he sees in the world. And the world has changed. He described it, which we know it has. There is a growing division in politics. There's wars, there's environmental catastrophes. Xubing is quite pessimistic in the way he is talking about the destruction, what he believes to be the destruction of human civilization, and how we have developed wars where people are killing people with missiles. He feels that the whole of human civilization, the philosophies and religions that are present in the world, have lost their way. And then goes on to talk about the art world and the social world and the role of art in contemporary society, of trying to, again, to bind things together. But he is very pessimistic for the future of human civilization and is concerned that art is becoming powerless to affect the common good. And again, he speaks with regards to contemporary art using the metaphor of the coronavirus, stating that contemporary art needs to adapt to this changing environment, that it needs to be honest as politics become more dishonest. And he described this next piece, Gravitational Arena, to be his response to the destruction of the world. So Gravitational Arena, like the other works we've seen today, are temporary. This is a temporary installation. It, again, poses questions about perception that is extremely important. And also, as we're going to talk about, there are obstacles to see this that really challenge the viewer. And I think that is his point, to point out that we do not have the whole view. We cannot see it all. This is a site-specific work in the Museum of Art in Pudong. The scale, in looking at the example, you can see it's a very tall, narrow space. It's nearly 30 meters high. It was created with 1,600 square word calligraphy characters that have been mounted on this aluminum web. I have seen just little video clips of actually the construction of it and the installation of it. And the other thing that you can see a little bit in this is how it finally, it connects to the top in this framework. Then all those characters are pulled down to draw down to a single point in the floor down below, which is actually a mirrored floor. And so there's lots of reflections that are set up with this, depending on where you are looking. Xu conceived this as the model, specifically, that it was a wormhole, which is a hypothetical structure of a gravity well in the fabric of space-time which connects 2 points in space and time. It's consistent with Einstein's general theory of relativity. And believe me, I never thought I would be talking about the theory of relativity with regards to Chinese art history, but I am. And I'm very grateful for my resident physicist, my husband, who was able to describe really what a wormhole was to me. So in terms of the title, we understand that the gravitational arena itself, or the gravitational part of it. But the arena is something different. And we can see that in looking at the slide here with all the windows and doors that allow us then to see it. The concept of an arena is that we have multiple perspectives and multiple points of view. When you go to an arena to see a sports event for someone like that, that every person in that is going to have a slightly different impression and view of what is actually occurring. And so that implies that the spectator is extremely important to this, and that he has geared this for the spectator. So there are at least 4 different floors to look out, different vantage points. The slide on the right-hand side shows the goal of what he's trying to create, which is this wormhole of characters creates a vortex that stretched to the ground. And this particular diagram, these obviously had to be created with computer-generated modeling, which had to be also what was used to create the characters themselves, because they warp, they distort. And but here on the right-hand side, I think we're at the top looking down, and to where the wormhole then would go to the floor, as we see here. It collapses to this point of singularity, and then it spreads out again. So you can see something of the overlay of different distorted characters, and how that then begins to really frustrate the possibility of reading. So we're looking down there. Here is a view to show you how the characters are so distorted as they finally come to that point and attach to the floor. So extreme distortion of the characters as they move to the floor makes them unreadable. Let's see, and I want to show you this video in order to do this. Hope I can make this quiet. Yes. I have to turn down the sound, sorry. You may not be able to hear me very well. I'm not able to turn off the music, unfortunately, in this particular application, but we're looking down the wormhole. All right. Turn up my sound again here. That video is extremely interesting in showing the kind of sense of rotation and movement, but also the experience of descending down into the wormhole. And also that had to be computer generated. There is no way that we could actually see that. We could not be in any position to see that. And so I really appreciate that video. Unfortunately, the music is very strange. The text is what we're looking at here. And this is what was turned into the square words and what has then been distorted then down through the wormhole. This is an excerpt from Ludwig Wittgenstein's Philosophical Investigations from 1953. That Wittgenstein is a linguistic theorist, and so that's one of the reasons why certainly that Schubing is drawn to this, because Xu is very, very interested in language and misconceptions and misrepresentations in language. And one of the things that he includes, which you can see here, I've circled, is this kind of strange looking duck head. And what this is Wittgenstein's duck rabbit illusion, which illustrates Wittgenstein's linguistic philosophy. It theorized that misunderstanding in human cognition is the result of language. In other words, that you can be talking about the same things and not be able to understand one another, that we have different names for things, that from one culture to another. And it again indicates different perspectives and different points of view, which this work is all about points of view. There's also layering, and I just wanted to point this out because you can see better the duck head in the center there, how we look through portions of this to see across the side. Xu writes about how and discusses how you can never really see the whole thing. You can't take the whole thing in at once. And that also in these two images you see, as well as the distortion makes the characters totally, totally unreadable. The other aspect of it is in the right-hand side, you can see the reflection on the floor there. And I've not seen this. I've not been able to go there. I wish I had, because it would have been a very interesting experience to be walking around on that floor, seeing the reflections of myself looking up then into this canopy of this wormhole that Xu describes it as a very unsettling and where experience where you're not really sure. You have a feeling of being suspended within this space and within the words itself, and as being, in that case, would be rather unsettling. Here's another view. And also the challenge, of course, is that that human vision does not allow you to see around corners or around bent and curves. Another diagram that where you can see how each of the characters actually is slightly different. And the reason why is because as a computer generated design here, that is emphasizing the distortion created by gravity, and that the distortion then means that no character can be substituted for any of the others, that it is mathematically then precise. It comes down to that central point at the bottom and then is reflected out again. So Xu's point was to create a kind of reading chaos. Excuse me. So how do we interpret this? Again, at any one point, we cannot see the whole thing. We're provided doorways with which to look and which to view. There are 4 different levels. Excuse me. Excuse me. Xu states that people are always trying to find the correct angle with which to look at. And actually the only vantage point that would allow one to see this whole thing laid out and to allow one to read as if it were a two-dimensional, again, flat surface of text, is actually above the roof, above the ceiling of the museum. So it is impossible for anybody to see. One's ability to read all this is continually thwarted. But again, we have this tremendous immersive environment that requires us to participate. It requires us to attempt to read something. So, and in my personal opinion, I do believe that this work will eventually be considered as significant as a work as Book from the Sky. And regarding Book from the Sky, the final project, I'm going to call it that, I think we consider the Book to the Sky, because this is Xu Bing's Tianshu rocket, Tianshu, which is Book from the Sky, that was launched into space in February 2021. And for the last 3 years, Xu has talked about his interest in research and in creating space art. And he sees space as a new environment for creating all kinds of art. He was approached by a private company called iSpace that wanted to combine, wanted to collaborate between Book from the Sky and Xu Bing and the rocket, and wanted to launch the rocket with the characters onto it into sky. And so we're looking here at what is a diagram of it. There's four different sections, 4 different stages of the rocket that have been then printed with the characters from the Book to the Sky. Again, these fake characters. It was launched from the Gobi Desert on February 1st. Here you can see the printing of the characters and how they're being placed on the rocket. Getting the rocket ready for launch. Xu Bing was particularly interested in how the effects of friction would affect the characters as the rocket goes through the atmosphere, and friction then will cause the characters to distort. The payload was a Rubik's Cube with fake characters from Book to the Sky. And these are actually backwards, although Xu Bing's his name there, his signature is correct. The launch encountered several delays due to the pandemic. Also, finally, the government required Xu to prove that this text had no message. And as he says, that it's difficult to prove something that is not there. And it reminds me that in 1989, when he first showed the Book from the Sky, the government did not criticize it. There was criticism from the public and from scholars, but the government couldn't criticize it because there was nothing to read. They couldn't judge the content of this. And so it has been able to, they couldn't criticize it. It just continued on. There was nothing they could find that was politically subversive. But here in 2021, they were just checking, just to make sure that there was something that it was still safe to send. The launch failed to achieve orbit, and parts of the rocket were scattered through the Gobi Desert. However, the first stage, which is what we're looking at here, landed where it was supposed to, and Xu then describes it as looking like a wounded animal waiting for help. He pulled this first stage of the rocket and other things that fell down in the Gobi Desert, became part of a new exhibit in Beijing. And I was trying to figure out some way to really kind of wrap up this talk in a way that really makes connections between things. And the fact is that Xu is constantly innovating, that his statements is that in order to say something new, you have to create a new method, you have to create a new way of expressing that he could not then use other things that he's done in the past, techniques and modes of expression he's used in the past, to say something new now, that it has to be something, a new mode of expression. And he has totally embraced science and technology. His additional works are he's using a decommissioned satellite to create kind of video projects that are then beamed back to the United States, back to China. He has created a full-length feature film from snippets of surveillance videos in China. He has also then embraced AI as a way of creating individual films that he has fully embraced then what is the science and technology of the world, the modern science and technology of the world, to create art. So I cannot say that he is going to be returning to things like Book from the Sky, and anything that we have seen so far in the past. The direction that Xu is moving is one of constant invention, adapting technologies and materials for art. And as he states, that the role of contemporary art is to develop these new modes of expression and say something new for the first time, I think we can consider that Xu will continue to do that. I anticipate that he will continue to create works that will challenge, intrigue, and inspire viewers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne, for that lovely presentation and all that great information about what Zubing's been up to lately. We have a couple questions, and I just want to remind everybody as we move into our Q&A session, if anyone has questions, please put them in the Q&A box. There's a little icon on the Zoom menu bar that has little letters Q&A and a little kind of speech bubble. Just click on that. It should open a little window and you can type in your question. So the first question is, in Gravitational Arena, are the characters made from the previous language that he created?
Yes, they are. They are the square word characters.
Great, thank you. There's quite a few questions we have kind of about the work in the current climate of China and the government, so I'm going to try to lump these all together. You had mentioned that the government didn't have much to criticize as far as the language because he had made that language up. But are there any other of his works, or can you speak to if his work has been influenced by the Chinese government and wanting to, I mean, his work seems to be very subtle and kind of it's complex and it's layered with the technology and the different materials, but do you know if he's got an eye to what the government might say or do?
A little clarification on that. The Book from the Sky, which I have behind me, those are characters that could not be read at all. So it's just totally empty. And I think that's what allowed him to, because there's no anti-government, there's no content in those, that in 1989, which of course is this period of tremendous political tension, and tension between the pro-democracy movement and the Chinese government, that in creating Book from the Sky, it reflects so much of his appreciation for both the history of China and literacy, even though it cannot be read, that I think it definitely skirted that, and the government couldn't find any kind of prohibited message. He has been asked several times if he feels like he's coming back to a really repressive regime when he returned to China in 2007. He said no, and that I think it is because his work is very, very subtle, but he also described China as being a place now of of tremendous creativity and experimentation. And he stated that he can do things in China that he would have never been able to do in the United States. So I think he feels like he really has a lot of autonomy to create what he wants. He is not the political figure that Ai Weiwei is, that is very much in your face. But Xu is, and Xu, what Xu does is really kind of ask questions. He poses questions. He doesn't tell you exactly what he thinks. I don't know if that answers the questions or not, but
I think it does. That was great. Thank you. Another kind of follow-up question, you mentioned Ai Weiwei. Have you seen, has there been a lot of comparisons between the two? And then also, are there other contemporaries that are doing similar work?
I have not seen, I've not seen connections or comparisons between Ai Weiwei and Xu Bing. They're so dramatically different. That Ai Weiwei is always in the public eye as a dissident artist. Xu Bing has never been considered that. In terms of more of other contemporary artists that are working in China, there are some that are also of tremendous international status. That like Cai Guochang, that that does a lot of the burned works. There are the fireworks that he does. There's several others, and some that have quite a bit of presence in the United States. Zhang Huan is another one. I think that probably the people that he is going to most influence are his doctoral students, of which there are a number of them, and that as he shapes the curriculum, that I can imagine that we're going to be seeing a lot more students that are inspired by the kind of open-ended questions that Xu Bing poses for us. I think how Xu differs is that he's extremely respectful of the viewer's experience and wants to know what that's like. He does criticize other contemporary arts. He doesn't name names, but says you have all these contemporary artists that now are just doing something very haphazardly that's not very, very appealing at all, and is so obscure that the viewers can't understand it at all. Xu doesn't want that to be the case. He wants people to be able to enter into those works, and that he wants them to be accessible. But I think that probably as that contemporary art in China has become so divergent in terms of the forms and the techniques and the messages, that but Xu stands out as a person that, again, is really reflecting so much of Chinese society and appreciation for the viewer.
Thank you so much. That was great. We've got a couple questions about the rocket. The first question comes from Jeff Kinkley. How is the rocket funded?
It's private funding. The company is called iSpace. It is a rocket company that I think has had about 60 or 70 launches, and approached Xu.
That's amazing. Love it. Also related to the rocket, let's see. I apologize, I lost my place on my questions. Oh, here it is. Could you, I don't know if you can go back to that slide, but maybe could you go back and explain a little more what it says on the outside of the rocket?
Oh, let's see if I can move this. Oop. What it says on the side is basically the sections of square word calligraphy. And I didn't bring in the image that shows you exactly what sections they chose, but but Xu did go through parts of that. They made selections of lines of characters. And I think that they're probably the 17 character, no, it's gonna be longer than that, of layout of some of the pages.
Thank you so much for going back to those images. Appreciate that. Another question going back to Book from the Sky from Jeff Kinkley. How did Zhu Bing create the backwards fake characters for woodblock printing?
Well, he designed the characters. And of course, when you're designing the characters, they're going to be, let me go back here. I can show you that too. Whenever you're doing printing, you're having to give a reverse of that. So what he did design the characters straight up as we see here. But then in order to place those on the blocks, to draw those on the blocks, he had to draw them, of course, on very thin paper, flip it over, and then rub off the paper as much as he could to reveal the characters, and then he would carve through the paper to do that. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, no, I think it does. Hope if anyone has more questions or follow-ups, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. Another question related to the characters in Book of the Sky. Megan asks, did his use of made-up characters show some questioning of the Chinese identity?
That's a great question. I think that's something for viewers to consider. And I think you could probably argue that in many ways it challenged that Xu is very interested in the kind of in-between states of things like that, and things that are where there is a sense of contrast. And I would be interested to hear from other listeners about whether or not they think that's the case.
Thank you so much. That really does tie into what you were saying about Xu Bing's art really being about questions and wanting the audience to be thinking about his work and what it means. Okay, our next question is, can you go into more about what's next for the artist?
Well, Xu is working still what he's been writing about, and if you go to his website, he's got everything according to the dates, to the years he's working on. There are still so he basically, a lot of his focus at this time is, and since the pandemic, has been with technology. What he has been doing also is exploring alternative uses of things that we see all the time. And one of the interesting things about his work, such as in what's called Dragonfly Eyes, is a film that was created entirely of sections of surveillance videos, which of course, surveillance cameras are everywhere in China. And he created a film, feature-length film, splicing together images or sections from 11,000 hours of video to create something that's like a melodramatic love story with this. And in doing so, he both is creating a storyline, a narrative, and then also pointing to the fact that we are under surveillance all the time. So he's doing that. He's extremely interested still in communication. He is still, I didn't bring it in, but he does a work called Book from the Ground that is still, then he's developing parts of that. The Book from the Ground is a story that you can read that's made entirely out of emojis and symbols that he had collected over several decades He describes it, his time spending a lot of time in airports because he is so international, and that he would collect like safety cards out of the airplanes that had these characters or signs or symbols that tell you what you're supposed to do, and realizing that that is almost, it's not really a language, there's not a structure to it, but you can understand. Then multiple cultures can take a look at that and know exactly what this is. They know where a restroom is, they know where to go left, they know where to look for a clock, all of these kinds of things. And so he began to create a book based on that. It's called Book from the Ground. You can actually buy it on Amazon. It's where I got my copy of it. And it is 24 hours in the life of a single person. And so he's very interested in how whether or not communication is universal. How do you make it that way? So that is one of the projects that's still ongoing. That he has then is using that same kind of emoji type of narrative to talk about philosophy as part of it as well. He has working with a decommissioned satellite that he says has photographs of it. That is the satellite that is again in orbit around the world that has a selfie stick on it, and the selfie stick has a video that they're able to upload then some computer animation of a person that is walking carrying this big bag of stuff that is then spilling out as this rotates around the world. And it takes pictures at the same time of the world behind it, the earth behind it, and the images on the selfie stick. He really feels that space is a new arena for art. And it's going to be interesting to see this total embrace of science and technology. He describes science as being really honest, where politics is not. So I would suggest to go take a look at his website. It has been updated within the last week or so, and there you can also find his essays about why he does what he is doing, what his interests are.
Thank you so much for that. We've got a few more questions, so I'm going to try to go through them. Going back again also to the book from the sky. Janice asked, did the artist carve each of the characters, or did he have assistants? And then if you could broaden that to his other works. I know you mentioned students, and
Yes.
so yeah.
He did. He carved all of these. And he writes, I'm going to go here, you can see a little bit of this, his point of design and carving of the characters. It took him 4 years. He describes how his friends are going out other places and going to talk about art, and he's in his room carving wood and carving characters that cannot be read. It was quite a long process to devise the characters. And he spent extensive amount of time observing and studying old books to see the best way to do this. Let's see, there was another part of that question, and I think I lost that. If you could remind me.
Yeah, it was just to broaden that question to his other works. His installations are quite large and things. So are there students assisting him? Does he have other artists working with him?
Yes. Yeah, and I remember now with the book from the sky. He writes about needing to find someone that can actually print it. So he did work with a printer in Beijing to kind of test it, but he found a printer that was some distance away and that he had to fly to and then ride a bicycle to for 2 hours in order to take them the characters. So he did, the printing was done by somebody else, by another group. The binding was done by another group. Each of these books, there are 4 volumes. Each of the books are separate, but 4 volumes or 4 editions of each one. Or no, excuse me, 4 volumes. That each of those volumes needed to have their own wood box that was created also. In terms of what he does now, that he does have assistants, workshop assistants. He has, again, studios in both New York and in Beijing. And but all the kind of installations that he does when he's going like background story or whatever, or also tobacco project, that he hires or he incorporates, somehow collaborates with students to come help him. And so that's another aspect of how this work becomes really integrated into a society, is when you get a chance to actually participate and create, and it becomes almost a co-productive, co-creative process. That of course he probably has a final say, but realizing that when you have other people that are helping, that you have to give up some of your control, and I think he is okay with that.
Thank you. We've actually hit 11 o'clock, but I wanted to check in with Ann. We have a few more questions. Would you mind staying on for a few more minutes to answer?
Sure, that's fine.
Great. Thank you. The next question, again, also related to A Book from the Sky. When did he let the cat out of the bag that the characters are fake? Did he announce it at the onset, or did he let the audience figure it out?
The audience figured it out. I mean, there was no need to explain. But the questions have been asked then, why are the characters all fake? And again, he was interested in reaction. What would happen if you create something that's so exquisitely beautiful? I was thinking about this the other day, about it would be as if you were handed a beautifully wrapped present that you're so excited to see what's inside of it. And either you can open that up and nothing is there, or else you can not even ever get past the beautiful wrapping. That is something that is really meant to frustrate. So he did not announce it, but he did describe, again, why he did it, or the fact that there is no content here. He wanted to create something with no content.
That's amazing. Okay, great. Jeff, asking these serious questions. Jeff says, it seems to me some meaning, intended or not intended, can be imputed to any visual, auditory, or intellectual creation. I'm thinking of Huang Young Yu's owl with one eye closed.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was the left or the right eye depends on the orientation. So far, Zubing is exempt.
You're right about Huang Yongyu, and part of the interpretation has to do with the time. With the winking owl, this was a painting that was done by a traditional Chinese artist during the time of the Cultural Revolution. A painting of an owl with one eye closed that was then castigated and described as by the Gang of Four and Jiang Qing, who was Mao Zedong's wife, as having one eye closed the revolution. That point of interpretation, basically you can twist meaning into anything. But as far as I know, from what I have read, Xubing is kind of immune to that, or escapes that. I think part of it is that he is so eloquent, and also in many ways really is so appreciative and respectful of Chinese culture as well.
Thank you so much. We have this great last question from Suzanne. I think you said that Zubing thinks that art ideas should spread through the population like the coronavirus does, but his ideas seem so revolutionary and intellectual in a way. So do you think his ideas have and are spreading through the population?
Oh, what a great question. I don't know that I can necessarily answer that question because I've just been looking at his works. I would, and he is kind of at the forefront of all of this. I think if his ideas and his methods, he does do talks about his methods and why he does things, and so I would say that a lot of that transmission right now may be happening in public speeches, but yeah, I don't know that I can necessarily answer that. That's a really fantastic question.
Thank you so much, Anne, for answering all those questions. We do have to wrap it up. Oh, there's a couple more sliding in. Okay. No, we're good. So, yeah, thank you again, Anne. I'm gonna wrap it up here with just our audience has shared some lovely comments. Lillian says, thank you for the brilliant presentation. It would be difficult to understand Zubing without your explanations.
Thank you.
Shuju says, just a quick thank you. It's wonderful. Mike says, excellent presentation. Jeff also says, marvelous art and conceptions. Also says, marvelous presentation. So thank you. Yeah, I want to just echo our audience. This has been great. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We are going to transition to our tea house in a few minutes. But first, I wanted to remind everyone that next month in February, we have our spring banquet. It's going to be a little bit, yeah, well, it's also for Lunar New Year as well. But it'll be our spring banquet. So please keep an eye on your email. We'll be sending out more information very soon so that you can register and join us for that lovely meal and just a great time that we always have every year. If you have any parting comments you'd like to add, you're welcome to.
If you're interested, I really strongly suggest you go to shubing.com, and where there is a wealth of information on him. And he's a very inspiring artist. He's an artist that I've always been very challenged by. And so I'm really looking forward to what he continues to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Anne. I know we dropped that his website in the chat already, but I'm going to do that again as well, just so it's there. All right. Thank you again. Thank you, audience, for tuning in. It's been great to see you all. Happy New Year, and hope to see you at the tea house. Thanks again.